I might suggest therapy for liking spreadsheets. I don't know. That's just, I might just offer that just gentle.
Welcome to the Exploring Washington State podcast. Here's your host, Scott Cowan.
All right, welcome back to this episode of the Exploring Washington State podcast. Today I'm with the Bellingham Bells General Manager, Stephanie Morrell. Stephanie, welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you for taking the time you've been instrumental actually in me being able to have these conversations with the team. So thank you publicly for your help. But before we talk about the Bellingham Bells, let's talk about you. What's your kind of backstory? How did you end up in the chair that you're in? Don't say, well, I walked into the office to no. How did you end up as the general manager of this team?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, so I grew up in Washington State in Eastern Washington and came over to Bellingham to go to college at Western back in 2004. And when my days at Western were done, I studied journalism and PR and communication there. Proud Viking, loved it there. And when I was done, I had just met, my boyfriend, who's now my husband, and both of us were like, yeah, we don't want to go anywhere. Like, even if we can't find jobs, we're just going to stay here. And so we decided to stay in Bellingham, and I got my very first job out of college at the Bellingham Herald, which is our local newspaper here. And I was working with local businesses selling print and digital advertising. And so I was working with a lot of small businesses, helping them with their marketing and advertising plan. And really that job is like being a marketing director for like 50 different businesses, because a lot of them don't have marketing directors. So you're like helping them do ad copy and design and helping them talk strategy, which I loved. And I really got very connected to Bellingham, met a lot of cool people. And so at the time, I've been there about 2 years when the Bells, I was familiar with the Bells and I'd been to some Bells games, but the Bells got a new owner, and it was Eddie Poplowski, and he was from the Bellevue area. And I had heard that he was going to come in and rebrand and try to really, send the Bells on a different trajectory. And he came into the Herald and he wanted to partner with us. And I was their ad rep and just kind of worked with them very closely for a couple of years and got to know their story and why they were doing what they were doing, and got to help them, get out with this new brand and new strategy and really trying to connect to the community. And about 3 years in one of those meetings, they said, hey, have you ever thought about working here? Which I hadn't, but I'm a big sports fan. And I really, at that point was going to Bells games. I've really appreciated their mission and their vision, and really liked Eddie and Nick Caples, who was the GM and really the only full-time employee at the time. And so they brought me over to be the second full-time employee in 2013. And I was kind of doing a lot of marketing and sales. And it was one of those weird things where I never knew I was very operationally gifted, but I just like all of a sudden was like, I love spreadsheets. I love operations. I love systems. And really over the next couple of years, just got to know the team and got promoted a couple times, and was fortunate enough to be promoted to GM in 2016 and work with Nick Caples for a couple of years. And then Eddie sold the team in 2017, and Nick moved on to Arizona, and we were bought by a wonderful family who lives up in Canada, and they kept me on, and the rest is history. And I've been here 8.5 years and can't imagine doing anything else. So that's kind of how I got here.
I might suggest therapy for liking spreadsheets. I don't know. That's just, I might just offer that just gentle. No, that's amazing. So you said you were a sports fan. Were you a baseball fan at that time? Not that really necessarily matters, but what sports are you into?
Yeah, I was a high school athlete. I played volleyball. My brother played baseball. We were a big baseball family, and my mom was running the concession stand. My dad was coaching, so I was always around it, and we're big Husky football fans, so that's kind of our number one. But it feels like in my family, which I've now continued on in my own family, like everything revolves around sports. Like every weekend is like what's on TV, or what sporting event are we going to, or so it's just we're just very inclined that way. And so I never played softball or anything like that. And that's the question everyone asks, but it's also has very little to do with my job, because I do understand baseball from, just being around it. And I love the game, loved going to Bell's games before I started. So I like all kind of sports. I think, honestly, if I have to be super honest, football is probably my favorite, but baseball is definitely number two, and probably number one, because I do what I do for a living. So they probably have to be tied, but I love them both. I love all sports, really.
Well, football's a fall sport, baseball's a summer and spring. So
yeah,
you got, you can flip flop half the year. You're good.
Yep.
I think it's amusing to me that you decided to stay in Bellingham. Where you said you grew up in Eastern Washington. Whereabouts in Eastern Washington?
Yeah, I grew up in Yakima.
Okay, Yakima. So I went to Central. So I grew up in the Tacoma Puyallup area, and I went to Central, and I thought, I think I want to stay here. So I didn't. We moved over here in 2017. So I lived on the west side all those years, and we moved over here to Wenatchee now. Eastern Washington has a certain appeal, but I also think college towns have a certain appeal, and Bellingham's got a cool energy about it. That's, although, as we talked before when we were on the phone, I'm sad about the coffee shop closing, but anyway, that doesn't need to be here. I will ask the question just to get out of the way. I always ask, where's a great place to get a cup of coffee? I saw that you had you've been drinking out of a coffee cup earlier. So where's a good place in Bellingham to get coffee?
Well, I'm drinking out of a Starbucks cup because I'm kind of a Starbucks girl, but that's probably not the answer you're looking for. So
that's a good answer.
I think in Bellingham, I really like Tony's Coffee in Fairhaven because it's kind of near my daily commute and where I have to drop my daughter off and everything like that. And then I also really like Cafe Adagio downtown. Okay. Those are probably my 1 and 2.
All right. So when you're drinking at Starbucks, what are you ordering?
I am a Black Americano fan. And the funny thing that people like to poke fun at me around here is that the number of shots I get in my Americano increases as we get closer to the season. So I kind of start out at the base level and then just kind of caffeinate as we go, but just shots and water. Yep.
Shots and water. But here's the thing. Do you realize that technically there's less caffeine in an Americano than there is in drip coffee?
I know. I did know that.
Yeah, so
I like Americanos better. Yeah,
you do. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So you're not drinking a venti chai with 6 shots of vanilla and 7 Splendas. Like, this is completely off topic, but I used to work for Starbucks, and when at the time that I was working for them, even if you were at the corporate offices, you had to go through coffee school, and you had to go work at one of the stores, which was really cool. I love that. Well, anyway, so I had to go work a shift at a store, and literally somebody came in, and I swear it was a prank because it was like 16 different items, and I had to call it back to the barista, and I'm just like, and it was like, 7 Splendas, but only half a packet of Sweet and Low, and I wanted. I swear they were pranking me. It was like, why are you drinking? Anyway, I just drink
not my
coffee.
thing.
Yep. It's not my thing. All right. Well, enough about coffee. Now, before we go, let's just unpack your job a little bit. So what's the day-to-day duties of a general manager in your case?
Yeah, well, the duties are oversee day-to-day operations, and day-to-day operations kind of means a different thing every day. And, you've been talking to different gyms in the league. I'd say all of our jobs are just a little bit different based on the staff that we have, based on, there's some very active owners in the league. There's some owners that take not as active day-to-day roles. So it just kind of depends. But for me, I oversee kind of every aspect, some deeper than others. So some of the things that I'm super involved with are sponsorship and our vendors and those relationships. I'm really involved with our host family program. I'm very involved on baseball operations. So being involved with our head coach on building the roster and making sure that roster stays maintained, and relationships with college coaches and all of those things. And then just the general operations piece of systems and how things work and how things need to be improved. And just basic stuff like, financials and accounting and just all the stuff that kind of keeps it running. So that's kind of my job, I've got a great staff. We've got a great summer staff. We have a great owner. So everyone kind of pitches in, but I always just say my job is to kind of, from a high level, make sure that the organization in general, in every single way, because there's all these different buckets, is just trending the right direction, and that we are committed and, living out the mission that we have, which is community development and excellence. That's been our thing for a long time. And so when we make decisions or we're trending the right way, I've always just got to make sure that, hey, is this something that's going to set us on the path of where we want to be? And we've grown a lot, and we're getting a lot of opportunities now to do things and be things and whatever. And we just have to really make sure that we're doing all of those things with our mission and our fans and players in mind. So that's probably one of the biggest jobs I have, is just keeping the organization on track. But there's lots of micro things that come out of that as well.
So I haven't asked this question of any of the GMs up to this point. Depending on how you answer, I might add this to the future ones. Season's over. Next day. Walk me through a high level of from the day the season's over to the first day of the next season.
Yeah. So generally, probably most of us would agree that the day the season's over, there's generally like 2 to 3, 4 days of you've got to pack stuff up, right? The ballpark is in just like pure ballpark operation mode. You got to take down tents. You got to put away the uniforms. You got to kind of winterize everything. You got to put everything away. And so we generally try to get that done as soon as we can, so that we can kind of take a couple weeks and just take a breather. Like last year was a crazy year. And I actually went on vacation and turned my phone off, not all the way off. I mean, I'm not that crazy, but I disconnected for, a week and a half, got away. And you really just kind of have to get back to a pace of normal life, because May to August is a sprint. And we all just know that we do what we do. And in May to August, baseball is the number one, and everything else you have in your life, family, your house, your this, your that, you just try to keep those things standing when you get through the summer. And that in the off season, everything's going to reset. And so, usually in August, take a little bit of time, and then end August, early September, everything really resets. So you've got recruiting happens in mid-August to mid-September. Usually all of the recruiting is done by end of September. So right away, you've got to get out there, and you got to start making those calls to college coaches and really get on top of that. And it starts earlier and earlier every year. So one of the first things, I usually take my week, and then, back in the office, and we're talking about recruiting strategy calls. And then generally that's a time of year where if you have staffing changes, or people are going to leave, or coaches decide not to come back, or whatever, that's going to happen then too. And so we have usually just in September and October, and then you have your sponsorship review meetings, and then sometimes, frankly, just things that you haven't had time for all summer. And so it's just like, oh, we know we need to do this, or we need to do that. And taking some time to do things like fan input surveys, how did it go? So the fall is just all about kind of setting ourselves up. A lot of the really good work happens in the fall. We usually get our schedule in the fall. So we're kind of making those base layer plans, kind of setting our travel and doing all those things. The fall is, we get back to nice 40-hour weeks, and we, our families remember who we are again. And there's all of those things, which are really fun. And then after the first of the year, it gets to be a lot more execution wise. So it's like, okay, we've sold this sponsorship, or we've done this. We need to, kind of put some pieces in place. Any new initiatives that you're, doing, like personally this year, we're doing some camps, we're doing a construction project. So kind of gets into, okay, these are the things that we need to do, and start to have conversations with vendors and other things. Because I think one of the misconceptions, people ask me all the time, like what I do outside of the bell season, like what my job is. And that tells me that they do not understand the flow of this, which is that, every single thing that goes into a season has to be done between September and April, because when you get to May, you don't have time to figure out what kind of hot dog you want, or, whatever. You have to do all that earlier. So, so that's a lot of stuff we do in early, March, April. And then when we get to May, it's obviously just, putting all those finishing touches on, and making sure we can get the players here, that they have their passports. I'd say almost every element of this is more complicated than people think, right? So it's like, oh, so they have 30 players. Okay, yeah, but all of those kids have to have a host family. And the host family, you know, if they're allergic to dogs, they can't live in a host family with a dog, and they have to have a passport, and they have to have insurance, and they have to, you know, we have to have documentation. They have to, you know, we have to figure out when they're coming, and, you know, all of these things with the uncertainty of their baseball, you know, schedules. So there's just there's a lot to unpack from a lot of these little things. And so that's a lot of what we do in April and May. And then obviously we get to the season and start all over again.
So one of the things that I learned, first off, you've explained that great. Thank you. I think I'm going to add that question in because I think it's interesting. It seems glaringly obvious what you said, but I hadn't thought about it in those terms, like winterizing the stadium. Yeah. That's perfectly obvious, but I hadn't thought about those terms. But what you said, you really shocked me with was you start, you know, building the roster, if you will, in let's just say September.
Yep.
I was a little, because I see the social media that the teams are putting out where they're announcing, you know, you're building some hype, who's going to be on the roster for this coming season. And so I think I just assumed that maybe January was when that was happening, not right after the season. And that's interesting. And then what could go wrong? You know, what the guys are typically what, 19 to 21, 18 to 22.
Yeah.
So 18 to 22-year-olds are perfectly predictable. There can't be anything that ever comes up at the last minute. Ever.
No, never. Yeah. It's, you know, that's part of the game. It is developmental. And a lot of these kids, I mean, people think of them as these big, strong athletes, but it's pretty common that when a guy comes out and plays for us, you know, it's the first time he's been on a plane by himself.
Oh, wow.
And, you know, because, they travel with teams and they travel with parents, but
by themselves. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, now all of a sudden they're trying to navigate by themselves, and they're calling me from, you know, SeaTac saying, I can't find the airport or shuttle bus. And, you know, it's that kind of stuff. They're learning life lessons, and we get really good kids. We've always made it a priority to recruit for character and, you know, to make sure that the character's there. But there is a lot of life lesson learning happening with this age group, which is actually really fun to be a part of. And
I'm chuckling, but I'm not chuckling at it. You know, I'm chuckling overall the concept. Like, I can see this.
Okay. For sure. Yeah, for sure. So definitely, we're lucky. We very rarely have issues, but you know, there's life lesson learning going on. Guys are learning how to do laundry and how to cook eggs and other things. So it just kind of is. And then you've got
to manage the host family side of it too. I mean, that's you know, that I'm, you know, that, yeah. All right. Wow. So building a roster, can you walk us through kind of the philosophy of building a roster?
Sure.
I mean, you mentioned character, and obviously you need, you know, a first baseman and a catcher, but what's some of the other components of roster building?
Yeah. So, you know, the way it works in our league that sometimes people don't know is that we really work with college programs, and we build those relationships, and we work with college coaches. So it's not really going out and scouting players. You know, sometimes you know who players are and you may call a program and ask for a specific player, but a lot of what it's built on is having these relationships and being able to say, who do you have? And that coach knowing your program, knowing what you're looking for as far as character, kind of player, kind of kid, and being able to trust that when they say, yeah, these are the 4 kids that you should really take, being able to trust that. So, you know, for us, and I think every program is the same, we've got a handful of relationships that are really long-standing that we go to first. A great example is UCLA. We've worked with UCLA for about 10 years. John Savage is one of the best in the biz, and he's just super honest, super reliable, and he appreciates the experience that his guys get here in Bellingham. And, you know, he sends us kids that are usually young, usually incoming freshmen, but phenomenal players, just phenomenal kids too. And so, you know, that's one where John be our first call. Hey, who do you have? And he would say, hey, these are the kids I want to go to Bellingham. And we don't even question it, because that relationship is still longstanding. And we've got lots of those sort of relationships. So, you know, you kind of start there and you build out your roster based on these programs that you've got these great relationships with, great track records with. And that's a two-way street, by the way, because these coaches are looking for quality summer baseball experiences for their kids, right? So they're looking for the life experience, looking for the baseball experience. They want them to get good coaching. They want them to have a good host family. They want them to be part of a well-run organization. And so when you provide a good experience, they go back and say, yeah, that was awesome. And they tell their teammates it was awesome. And then you can kind of continue that. And so we've been lucky to do that over the years with some of these schools. So you kind of start there. And then, every year there's new opportunities that present itself. We were really fortunate this year. We had 2 college coaches come to games that we weren't working with prior, but they came 2 games at the stadium last year to watch their athletes. And one was USC, the other one was Washington State. We were able to make connections with those coaches and take some of their players this year for the first time. So you always kind of have some new schools that you add. And then the way our rosters work is that we have full-time roster spots. But then say we signed this year 3 players from UW. UW is a quarter school. So even if they don't make a playoff, they will not be available to us till about mid-June. So if you take 3 kids from UW, you've got to have kind of 3 10-day players who can be available to you until the UW guys show up. And so we have usually 10 to 15 10-day contract players. And those are opportunities for maybe smaller school guys, younger players, community college players, and to give them an opportunity. And every year, some of those guys make the roster. That's just how it goes. A lot of them are really talented for one reason or another. They haven't gotten seen. They haven't gotten an opportunity. But we've had we've had 10-day players turn into all-stars. We've had 10-day players turn into, league batting champs and other things like that. So it's really cool. And that's part of it, is to make sure that you're covered to do those 10-day players. And so I'd say, the roster, usually from a year-to-year basis, you have your 5 core schools, you have a few new schools, and then you just have some where it's like, local players, or somebody had a connection to so-and-so and he's out there, and then, we call and ask for that player or this and that. So it's a lot of back and forth. Building the rosters, actually, we had a pitching coach who built our roster for 10 years. And he took a year off. So he's taken this year off. And so he resigned in late August. And so Adam Giesland, who's our head coach, and we recruited the roster this year. And I knew it was a lot of work, but I had no idea how much work it was. It's a lot of work. And it's a lot of conversations, and it's a lot of back and forth. But it's really cool. It's a cool process to be a part of. It's cool to see the names on paper. And then the next part is you just have to see this time of year. It's like, guys are getting hurt. They might throw too many innings. They might get shut down by their pitching coach. They might transfer, other things happen. So the roster changes a little. So you just wait to see what happens. And then, you got to get guys here and see what you can do with those names on paper.
All right. So a couple of questions. Painting with a broad brush. Is it harder to find pitchers or position players?
Oh, that is a really good question. It's a little harder to find arms, I'd say, just for a couple reasons. It's harder to find. It's not necessarily hard to find arms. It's hard to find arms that can throw a decent number of innings. Guys are throwing, not necessarily more, but there's just more emphasis on arm care, which as there should be. And college coaches are, they're shutting guys down if they think that they've thrown too many innings, so there's almost less pitchers in the pool sometimes. So some years you get a lot of guys, but they can all only throw 30 innings, or they can only go out for 3 innings at a time. And so sometimes it's hard to find that guy that can go out, give you that 5-6 innings once a week, and that his coach says, yeah, if you can throw 50-60 innings this summer, that's rare. That's more rare these days. And it's also just harder to, you carry more pitchers, and we carry more pitchers just because of the reality of arm injuries and injuries before they get to us and everything else. So you're looking for more of those guys, and they can be a little more difficult to find. But in general, I wouldn't say that recruiting is difficult at all. I would say I get 10, 15, 20 emails a week from people that are looking for spots to play, and coaches and, players. And a lot of those people are under the assumption that we start recruiting in January, and so, but I think there's honestly a lot of demand for it. So it's not really a scarcity issue. For the most part, we're usually able to to find, it gets hard in the summer. It gets hard in the summer towards the end of the year when you're looking for guys to fill in, guys that get hurt, and other things. That gets challenging. But other than that, it's not too bad.
Okay. So what do the college programs get out of this? What are their players? What's the benefit for the college?
Yeah, this really becomes an extension of the spring season, a summer developmental program. For most D1 high-end programs, it's an expectation. So it's not a choice. It's an expectation. You're going to go out and you're going to play summer ball. It does a couple things. One, obviously, continued reps, continued development. A lot of our guys are in that 18 to 21 range. So, like I said, we'll take John Savage's incoming freshman. We'll take Stanford's freshman, So a lot of those guys, really talented players, and they've got a plan for that player, but he's not going to crack the lineup at Stanford as a freshman, right? So there's a lot of guys that are waiting their turn. So they can come out and they can play every day. They can get at bats. They can get the confidence. So, a lot of it's that, getting the reps, getting the opportunities. And then there's some, life development stuff too, of just maturing and getting out and figuring out, how to live with the host family, how to communicate, how to play for a different coach. We swing wood bats. So it's a little more of a minor league experience than the metal bats. And so I think, the college coaches just really get that extension, that developmental opportunity. And I think that's why relationships really come into play, because I think, the coaches want to be able to pick up the phone and call the head coach and say, how is he looking? How is it going? They want to be really part of the experience. They don't want to ship their player off. And I tell people all the time, I'm like, we're borrowing these aren't our players. Like, we are borrowing them, and we need to return them either in the shape that we found them or better, and and so our relationships with our coaches really are that way. Like, we update them, we let them know what's going on, we send them sabermetrics reports and say, hey, here's what we're seeing, and just so that they're really in the loop, and that they can use, the experience to, when the guy gets back on campus in the fall, to be able to continue to build off that. So yeah, they really get the opportunity for, guys to learn and grow and have that opportunity. And when you play in the spring season, there's only so many at-bats and innings to go around, and you're trying to make a regional and you're trying to win a national championship, and there might be opportunities you just can't give guys because they haven't cracked the lineup. And so I think that's one of the big things that summer ball can give, is that they can give, playing every day or playing, every other day, just a lot more opportunities for some of these guys.
Do these programs ever ask you, I'm just going to assign the player's name is Billy Ball Player. And do they ever say, we really want Billy to learn how to do X? Like, can you help Billy learn? Or is that, let's say they want him to learn how to hit a curveball, just, over simplification. But do they ever come and say, this is, we'd like you to take Billy, and can you guys focus on this for the season?
Yeah, there's certainly always a conversation about, how do you want us to use them? What do you want them to work on? I'd say it's, in rare cases, it's something crazy like, well, he was pitching and we wanted to play left field, or, something. But most of the time it's things like, he's been in the middle of our rotation. We'd like to use him. He's been a back end bullpen guy. We'd like to use him as a starter next year. So we'd like you to use him as a starter next year. Gotcha. Or, he can play the corners pretty well. We usually have him at first, but we'd like him to see a little time at third. So it's some stuff like that.
Sure.
And sometimes they'll just say, it doesn't always have to be in a game, because we do early work every day. And so sometimes, a program might say, hey, do you mind at early work, getting him some reps at shortstop and seeing how that goes? And, because programs are always kind of trying to figure out too. A lot of these guys are versatile and have played a lot of positions. So yeah, it's usually things like that, but there's always conversations about what the plan for the player is. And we always take that input really seriously. And every guy usually comes with, a plan for the weight room, like what their strength coach wants them to be doing, and then a plan on the baseball side of what they want them to be working at. And maybe that's, be a variety of different things, but everyone's always on the same page about what those are.
So you're not going to take a kid that's been, top of a rotation starter and turn him into a shortstop and say, hey, we got your shortstop.
Yeah, no, we wouldn't. we wouldn't do that.
I know you were looking for him to be number 2 pitcher next year, but he really should be playing shortstop for you.
Yeah.
Sorry. That's what we needed, and we're going to use it there. So I do like the fact that it's, one of the things in these conversations is the word that just keeps coming back to me all the time is I just keep thinking of collaboration. It's a very collaborative relationship between the various programs that are supplying the players. It's very collaborative between the players. We need host families, the team, the community, the league itself. The league itself just seems competitive on the field, but collaborative outside the field.
Yep.
And that's really exciting. So that's enough nuts and bolts baseball. We'll let's talk the team, the Bellingham Bells. What's the backstory of the Bellingham Bells? I mean, you kind of gave it to us, but with ownership, but like, how long have the Bells been in existence? Kind of what's the high points of their history?
Yeah, so I actually have a book over here on my desk that's called Bays to Bells, and somebody wrote the book a long time ago, and basically just about how the Bells have been in existence here for 80 years. It's got a really cool story. The book's actually really cool. It has an index, so people come in. Sometimes they're like, "My grandpa was a Bell," and we can look up Grandpa and figure out what year he was and whatever. So it's really cool. So the Bells in like the 50s and 60s was a community team, kind of like a semi-pro team. And there was, when the men went off to war, the women played, and it was just really cool. And in the 70s, minor league baseball came in. The Bellingham Mariners were in Joe Martin Field for several years. Ken Griffey Jr. got his start there. So that's, a lot of people think Ken Griffey Jr. was a Bell, which he wasn't, but he did play at Joe Martin Field where we play, which is really cool. After the Mariners, it was the Giants and Dodgers. So there was about 20 years of affiliated baseball at the field. And during that time, the Bells still continued to be a community team, played kind of in a variety of ways. There's a really cool old iconic field, Battersby Field, and they played there for a while, and, et cetera, et cetera. So basically, Bellingham's just a great baseball community, very storied baseball community. And it's really rare that I talk to somebody that they don't tell me a story about going to Bellingham Mariners games or doing this or Dodgers or Battersby Park or, whatever. And so the Bells in 1999, I believe affiliated ball had gone out in 96. So there was a 3-year gap where there really wasn't anything. And so there was a businessman from New York. I don't know a lot about him. I think his name was George, and he, for some reason, decided to start the Bells in 99, and then only owned it for like a year or two and sold it to a local family who owned it for a while. But they brought back the Bells. They joined the Pacific International League at first, and then in 2005, when the West Coast League was founded, they joined the Bells, or joined the West Coast League. And so they've been, in our current form, we have been around, about 15 years, longer than that. Yeah. And I'm trying to think. Yeah.
The
Bells have been in the league for 15. Yeah, right. The Bells have been in the league for 15 years. It's been about 20 that the Bells have been around the community. So it's been really very cool to see, just the community kind of embrace that. And then just as far as, basically the Bells were around for a long time. And then in 2010, there was nothing bad about it. I just think that it had kind of lost its oomph a little bit. And so our current, or our past owner, Eddie Popowski, actually the way he found the Bells is that his son was a baseball player at Georgetown and was playing in the West Coast League. And he and his wife, Kim, came up to Bellingham to watch Danny play for the Walla Walla Sweets. And there was like 108 fans at this game. And he was just like, Bellingham is so cool. I love Bellingham. It seems like a place that really supports things. Like, what is happening here? And so then he just kind of got on a bender and decided to research it, and then he bought it. And so after he bought the team, he's the one who kind of set us on our current path. He rebranded everything, said, hey, we got to be community first. We got to have local products, local vendors. We got to make sure we develop the kids. We got to have a mission. We got to have a plan of where we go here. And really, I mean, the 7 years So Eddie bought the team. He owned it for about 7 years, and the attendance tripled during that time. And we won a title during that time and everything else. So, and then just kind of set on this new trajectory of, we've really had some nice fan support. So that's kind of what, the evolution of baseball in Bellingham has looked like.
Okay. So now you said, I hope that this isn't right, but you said there was 108 people and he tripled attendance. I hope it's more than 325 people.
No, I think Eddie's first year, he was really excited because he got attendance to 500 fans a game. And when he left in 2017, I believe we had about 1,600 fans a game that year. So, it tripled. We've had a lot of good fan attendance success.
What approximately how many people does the ballpark hold?
We have seating for 1,600, and then we have we have some group areas and a really large grassy berm. So we can have about 3,000 people at max.
Okay. Yeah. That's a lot of people to attend. That's great. Well, let's talk Bellingham Bells now. Walk me through. I'm going to miraculously appear at the stadium for a game in July. Okay. What's my experience going to be like? What does Bellingham do? What does your team do? Slightly different than everybody else. I mean, everyone's got their own little local flavor. So what's the Bellingham Bells local flavor?
For sure. Well, one of the things I love is that everyone does things differently. And I travel all the time, and I just love seeing how everybody's just a little bit different. I would say our ballpark is really unique. It's very old, but it's been updated. We have all turf and, video scoreboard and all of that. So, and honestly, our ballpark's kind of like a little piece of Americana. It's like free parking. You kind of wander in and it's just this cute little stadium. Like it's very Americana. It's different than some of the other stadiums that are a little newer and a little more commercialized. One of the things that we really do that Eddie was always big on is we really try to take care of our fans. And so, Eddie always said, you don't let somebody walk through the front door of your house without greeting them, and you don't let them walk out of the front door of your house. So we stand at the gate every night and we say goodnight to people. And that's me and my staff every single night, unless something's imploding. But for the most part, we're there. We have people greeting fans at the beginning. We do an all local menu pretty much. So we use Hempler's hot dogs and Ralph's pretzels and, all this different local stuff. And that's, kind of our own flavor. We have some, different promotions that we do, and, Family Fun Day Sunday with the bounce house for the kids and, some of these things. But our big thing, our owner now, Glenn Kirkpatrick, and I, our big thing is just atmosphere. I appreciate when people who are big baseball fans come to the game, and I know that they will come to the game, but there's not enough big baseball fans to fill our stadium in Bellingham.
Right.
So, those people are going to come, they're going to listen on the radio, they're going to keep score. And I don't want our atmosphere to be a hindrance to them, but I also want to make sure that if you come to the game and you don't care about baseball and you don't know what a shortstop is, you can have a good time. And I think that's what we've created. We've created an atmosphere that literally people ask me who won the game when they leave. And I'm totally fine with that because this is the community's team. It's a community gathering place. It's a place where you can come out and high five your neighbor and have fun. It's affordable. So we want to create an atmosphere that was fun, somewhere you'd want to be. And I think we've done that. And I think that's kind of our big thing is atmosphere. And we continue to build on that and just, find ways to make the atmosphere cooler and really kind of, try to feel like something's going on, which is kind of our big thing. So that's what's probably a little different is just our, we kind of try to turn it into a party a little bit, but a baseball party,
Baseball party. and who won the game?
A lot of people know, but not everyone does.
I know that's funny. That was like, who won? Sorry, I just who won the game? This has it has something to do with baseball, but this is my memorable minor league baseball experience. Many years ago when my children were very young, I went to an Everett Aqua Sox game.
Yep.
I don't remember how old my children were, but I was carrying my daughter so she was probably 2, year and a half. Yeah. Anyway, and I want to go to a ball game, so I took my kids to the Aqua Sox, and I had a diaper bag on one shoulder, kid on the other arm, trying to keep my son from running into the street. And I was greeted. It's a funny thing you said. You don't you greet people when they come to your house. So somebody said, "Oh, you're welcome," and what I must have looked like the typical harried single dad. And they ended up going, "Well, come with me." And I bought tickets, and they upgraded me I was in the third row behind home plate.
Oh, cool.
And I had bought general admission tickets, right? And they took me to my seat. They helped me with my kids, and we lasted like 2 innings. Because, but I remember the hospitality that team exhibited.
Yep.
I also remember sitting there with guys with radar guns, clocking pitches too. It was like there were scouts. I was sitting around the scouts, so they probably didn't like the guy with the 2 little kids interrupting their work. But they made me, I tell that story 20 plus years later, like I appreciate that. And so I think having a party at the stadium, if you will, and welcoming people to come and experience it, that's awesome. That builds community.
Yeah. And I think, across the league, one of the things that we all do that we can do because we're small teams, because we're not the Mariners, and the Aqua Sox certainly have done the same thing, is that we can make, these memorable moments for people. And it doesn't, and sometimes I have to remind myself that I've been around the ballpark all the time for 8 years, but if somebody, comes to the game and you say, "Hey, do you want to come out and do you want to, walk over to the mound or see the team or throw first pitch?" Or, if it's maybe, kids being back kids and getting to be in the dugout with the team, or there's so many, unique and memorable things that we're able to offer people that aren't really major things, right? It's just like, "Hey, do you want to come out and watch batting practice, or do you want to do this?" But people, especially little kids, one of the coolest things is in all of our stadiums, my players sign every autograph every night. And, there's little kids out there. They don't know who these kids are. They think they're superstars, and so it's really cool. That's probably, honestly, I don't know if you're going to ask this question or not, but I'll just ask it for you. My favorite part of the job is really that. It's the community stuff, and it's the being able to interact and, do these special things for people, for organizations, for people in the community. That's really one of my favorite parts.
So do the players sign autographs every game?
Yep.
Are they available?
Yeah, they are. Yep.
That's awesome, because you just made some 5-year-old's day.
For sure.
You made some 10-year-old day, and that autographed piece of paper, card, ball, whatever, bat, whatever they signed, that kid's probably going to lose it as they grow up, but they're going to remember it. What I mean? It's going to be somewhere in the mess of a kid's bedroom. I can't really find, but they're going to remember it. And that reflects positively on the sport. It reflects positively on the team. And that's amazing. Sports need rivalries. You mentioned before we went officially live, or maybe it wasn't live, but you mentioned you're a Husky football family, right? So that also means you love the Washington State Cougars.
I love the baseball team.
Yeah, so you have to love Cougar football too. I have autographed Cougar helmets over here, but I also have an autographed Husky helmet there too.
Okay, all right.
So, but I went to Central, so I can pick and choose. But you went to Western, you can pick and choose too. But you are a Husky football fan, which means the dreaded Cougars.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. Good-natured rivalry. You might root for the Cougars against every other team but the Huskies.
Yep.
Who's the Bellingham Bells rival?
Yeah, well, rivals are always a funny thing in the West Coast League because, we turn over our players every year. So those rivalries don't really last with the players because it's new every year. I would say geographic, a lot of the rivalries just come from geography and history. I guess those are the two things. So the Corvallis Knights are 5-time champions. They're incredible organization. Dan and Bree and Brooke, who's their head coach, amazing job. Amazing people. Right. They've earned every, people talk about how they're the overlords and, whatever. No, they do a great job, and they've earned every single trophy and every accolade they've gotten, they've earned. We have, always battled with them. We've had 2 championship series with them in 14 and 16. In 14, we were fortunate enough to win the title in 3 games. And in 2016, one of the best baseball games I've ever seen, we dropped game 3 to them down in Goss Stadium, led most of the game, and it kind of unraveled, in the 6th or 7th inning. And so there's some rivalry there. We love to play those guys. We get up when we play those guys. They're a great organization. We've always had really tight ball games with them, and there's a ton of respect for them. So that's a rivalry for sure, a very friendly, good-natured one, but definitely a rivalry. And then just geographically, the Harbor Cats are probably our closest because you can, drive across the border and hop on a ferry and be in Victoria in maybe 3 hours. And so we tend to, travel some fans when we go up there. They travel some fans when they come down here. And we generally, before this year, we've played them home and away pretty much every year. So you see them a lot. And they've been really good. They're another organization that's well coached, well ran. And they're one that we always find ourselves mixing up in, whether it's a playoff or a couple years ago, it came down to us or them for a first half playoff. It came down to, a head for head, 1 game type thing. And so we've, it's somebody that we find ourselves in close matchups with again, and someone we respect a whole heck of a lot. So those 2 teams probably, but everybody in the West Coast League is competitive, and, we love playing all those guys. So it's kind of a rivalry with all the different teams. Everybody wants to beat everybody.
Well, you're extremely competitive when you're playing the games. It's just, you're not the first GM to mention Corvallis. I know that may be a shock to you. Shocker. But you're not the first. You're not the first GM to mention them, and and that's. But I think having a team in any sport that's the dreaded Yankees, let's say, love them or hate them, they're good for the sport. The Dallas Cowboys, love them or hate them, they're good for the sport. They raise the bar for everybody.
Yes. Correct. Yep.
And famous Bellingham Bells, guys that made it to the show. Any names?
Yeah. So we definitely have, Mark Zebchinski, who has kind of kicked around the league. That. Yeah. And he was a Mariner for a short time. He played for the Bells. Adrian Sampson is, I believe, back in the league. He's played over in Korea, also been a Mariner and a Ranger. And so from my era, we have Spencer Howard, who was a Bell in 2015, 2016. He was a pick from the Phillies and then pitched with the Phillies for a few years. And then now he's with the Rangers. And Spencer was part of the Rangers rotation last year, and I think will continue to be this year. And then Michael Rucker, who was a Bell in 2013 and 14, was called up to the Cubs last year and earned a spot with them. So he'll continue to pitch with them. But we've got, just a really a long list of guys who are getting ready to crack Major League Baseball. So Austin Shenton is a former Bell. He was drafted by the Mariners. He's part of the Rays now, but he's in Double-A with them. He's from Bellingham, so he's kind of our pride and joy here at Bellingham. And I think Austin's got
hometown kid.
Yeah, I think Austin's got a real shot. Matt McClain was a Bell in 2018. He actually turned down about $2.5 million to go to UCLA, and so we got him that year after he turned down the draft money. Played at UCLA, got drafted again. Got more money, I think, the second time. So it worked out okay for him. Matt's no doubt going to wear a Major League uniform. There's just no question in that. And a number of other guys, too, that are close. And I think going to, crack those rosters. So that's really fun. That's, the league, I think, in general has had – there's a list that the league has of all of the different the affiliated, but also just MLB players who played on West Coast League teams, and it's long. And it's
pretty substantial.
Yeah, it's substantial, and the baseball has gotten so much better in this league just in the last 5 years, though, that I think you're just going to see that list just grow and grow and grow, which is really cool.
Let's talk about this year's team for a second. Coaches. Who are the coaches for this year?
Yeah, so our head coach is Adam Gieslin. We actually hired him in fall of 19. And 2020 was supposed to be his first year, and then we canceled that season. So 2021 was his real first season, so last season. Adam did a great job. He's a good fit for our, development first type of program. He does a great job with culture and with players. And so Adam will be his second year as our manager. And then Carlos Arroyo is going to be our pitching coach. And we had just a phenomenal, I mentioned him earlier, Jim Clem was our pitching coach for over 10 years. Local legend, phenomenal pitching coach, and just got to the point where he needed a year away. And Glenn and I found ourselves thinking, okay, we can't take a step back here. We've had a phenomenal pitching coach. These coaches have come to expect this kind of pitching coach. And we've had a guy who's got not only baseball expertise, but just years and miles, right? To just, have seen things and have experience. And so we just went out and started asking around, and we found Carlos, who was a coach in the Phillies minor league system for about 40 years. Carlos was a roving coach, a coach at almost every level, pitching coordinator for some time. And so we set up a call with Carlos, and I just instantly knew, like, this is our guy, because the experience, you don't hang out with one team for 40 years if you don't know what you're doing and if you don't have the pitching knowledge. And he's got the pitching knowledge. He's 100% got the pitching knowledge, but he's a great man. He's got just a phenomenal outlook on pitching, and just understands the new school of baseball, but also takes it old school as well, and has that approach. So really excited about Carlos. And then we've got 3 young assistants, 2 with us from last year. So Hayden Hastings, who's our catching coach and was a catcher at Tulane and is now on staff at Edmonds Community College, and David Higuera, who is from California. He's a coach at Caltech. And then our 5th coach is our assistant pitching coach, who will work with Carlos. And his name is Cody Anderson. And he's actually a former Bell and a former WSU Cougar. And Cody was a Bell in 2015. And we had the opportunity to bring him on as our assistant pitching coach. So really excited about that. So yeah, great lineup of coaches. With the coaches, we really we look for character. We can't preach character in our clubhouse if we don't have coaches who are hard character. Right. So we start there. We have really high expectations of how these guys conduct their business and how they act on the field and how they act off the field. And it has to start with the coaching staff. And so we feel really lucky to have the group that we have that's really experienced and knowledgeable, and also just really great guys.
Great. How about the roster this year? Do you have many returning players, or is this a primarily first-year player for you this year, or where are you at with that?
Every year I feel like we try to hit that number of like 5 to 10 returners. This year we have, I think, somewhere in that. We've got probably, 8 or so. And our team last year was just really, they were incredible from the standpoint of buying into the culture, following the rules, not causing trouble. And they were talented players too. And so we're excited to bring back some players from that roster. So we'll have some returners, and then just a lot of new players. There's always a lot of new players every year. And so we'll have new players this year. We have some new schools that we're working with, and just some, different players, but really excited about it. A lot of these guys, we track their stats in the spring, and they're getting opportunities and they're doing well. And, we're excited for them to be able to come to Bellingham and see what they can do.
Where's the most interesting location you've gotten a player from? It doesn't, for example, it doesn't mean that they didn't say go to UCLA, but from around the globe, where has there been anybody from a place you went, I didn't know they played baseball there?
Not necessarily. Generally when we end up with like international players, they are from places where baseball is fairly prominent, but we had a pitcher several years ago who was from Venezuela. And then last year we had Yugo Hamakawa, who was from Japan. And other than that, you end up with guys from all over. We've had players from every state. I think it's not so much like where they're from. The always really interesting thing to me is the connections that people have to our area when they're from like wherever, Florida. Like, we have a player coming from Texas who requested a host family because he knew them, because they were neighbors when they lived in Vegas like 20 years ago. And then they moved to Texas. The family moved to Bellingham. 20 years goes by, and now he's coming out and he's going to live with them because they've like stayed in touch. And so there's like always those sort of things. Like there's one of those every year that makes my head like, okay, the world is pretty big, but it's also very small.
So did these people know that they were to be a host family, or did he just spring it on them?
They did. They volunteered. Right. They were excited about it. But, we had 2 kids on the team a few years ago whose dads were college roommates at a college in Boston, and I hadn't seen, they were like frat brothers, and they hadn't seen each other in like 15 years. And then their kids get placed on the same summer team. Like, it's just stuff like that.
It's a small world. That's just, you can't make those up. You couldn't.
Exactly.
Well, last question about the team. So walk me through a typical day for a player.
Yep.
What's expected of a player, and is their day much different on a game day or an off day?
Yeah. Well, so off days, there's only like 8 or 9 of them in the whole summer. So we play over 60 games in like 69 or 70 days. And so there's very few off days. So we try to, those off days, it's like, that's your day. Do what you want to do. Maybe they'll go home if they're close enough to go home, or maybe their host family will take them to a Mariners game or out on the boat or, whatever. But those are kind of those sacred days. Those are their days. Maybe they'll go throw, it's pretty common. They'll go throw, maybe they'll go hit in the cages a little bit. Maybe they'll go to the gym, but it's going to just be, they can do what they want on a game day. So, these guys are usually not early risers. I don't think we got a lot of early birds. And so basically we do a fitness, a fitness hour or a fitness window between 10 and noon. And so the expectation is between 10 and noon, you go to the gym, or you go to the, we work with a recovery center called Prime Sports, which is unbelievable. They have compression therapy, they have hot and cold pads, infrared saunas. They work with high-end athletes, and there's former D1 athletic trainers that work at that facility, sports chiropractic. It's actually next level. It's really crazy that we even have it here. And we've had this awesome partnership with them. So it's like, you're going to go to the recovery center or you go to the gym, and then, wrap up by noon. Most of the time guys have an hour or so, grab some lunch, go home, get your stuff together. And then by 2:00, your position players are going to be rolling into the stadium. Some days, most days we offer early work. So between like 12:30 and 1:30, guys just want to get some reps out, just go on the fields, and the coaches will be out there running some early work and doing some drills. And then, 2:00 or so, our position players are going to be in the cages and getting some swings in that way. And then about 3:00, usually back down in the clubhouse, guys, getting food, getting ready for BP. Generally, the coaches will address the team around 3 or 3:30, come up to the field, and then take batting practice. And the pitchers will be doing their thing. Some of them will be, playing catch or shaking balls or, doing different things as well. And take batting practice till 4:30 or 4:45, and then head back down to the clubhouse and, get some nutrition, get some food. We've got snacks down there for them, and, run and get smoothies. I think the smoothie place across the street is like sponsored by the Bells at this point. But then by about, we start at 6:35, our games do. So by about 6:00, we get all the guys back up. They're in the dugout, they're in full uniform and kind of out throwing, warming up. And then the game starts, and, usually the game wraps about 9:00. We do a post-game meal for them. So usually something catered, pasta, whatever. So they eat, and then usually, they go out. Sometimes some of them actually go out for second meals, more of them than I ever imagined. A lot of them end up eating a second meal, go out for dinner with, their teammates or whatever, and then, go home and start the whole thing over the next day. So that's kind of what it looks like.
Well, one of the things that I've taken away from one of the benefits, I think, of the league is that this format exposes them to more what the minors and ultimately the major leagues gets them to. It's not a part-time job. It's a full-time job and then some.
Yes.
So that's awesome. Well, to wrap this up, this is me I say this every time. So what didn't I ask you that I should have? This is how I could like, what did I not bring up? Cause we could keep going, but like, what didn't I bring up that I should have about you or the Bellingham Bells or Bellingham?
Oh gosh. I don't know. I think you hit a lot of things. I'm trying to think.
Okay. Well, what do you do? What do you like to do for fun and entertainment when you're not being the GM? I mean, during the baseball season, we know it's all baseball all the time, but when it's the off season, besides Husky football, what do you like to do?
Well, Husky football, first and foremost, that's like takes my whole fall. Lately I'm really into group exercise. I don't know why, but I've gotten really into taking bar classes. There's a Bar 3 studio here in Bellingham. Got really obsessed with that. So I take a lot of group exercise.
What is that?
It's like a core cardio blend sort of thing. I'm not exactly sure how you describe it, but it's hard and it's good. It's across the street from our office. So I've been doing a lot of that. I like to read. I have a 4-year-old daughter, so I chase her around. And, we like to vacation. I like to cook. So I like to think I'm fairly well-rounded, and not just sports all the time, but yeah, my husband and I like to, just active, run and mountain bike, and Bellingham's amazing. Like that's one of the reasons why we still live here is we can walk out the front door of our house and be in a trail system in, a minute. And it's just, and we actually live at the base of Galbraith Mountain for mountain biking, which is like just trails, all these groomed trails. And it's just amazing, just what we have at our fingertips here in Bellingham. So definitely like to be active and get outside and then do all the stuff that my 4-year-old is into, like parks and children's museums and all that kind of stuff. So yeah.
Does your daughter go to the games? Does she like going to the ballpark?
Yeah, well,
she's a little young yet, but I mean, does she?
I don't know if this story is fit for the podcast or not, but I'll tell it to you, and then you can decide.
Sure.
So
we'll leave it in.
My daughter is a Bells baby through and through because I had her 2 days before opening day in 2018. I was pregnant that year. I was due at the end of June, and I had a very, in my head plan of how it was all going to go down. And my due date was June 30th. And my owner kept saying like, when are you due? And I'm like, June 30th, don't worry. It's June 30th. And then of course, 2 days before opening day, the team is on the road and I have to call Glenn and be like, yeah, so I think I'm gonna have a baby today. So you're going to have, and it was his first year as the owner. And I'm like, you're going to have to figure this out. And anyway, so I was back to work I didn't go back full time, but I was back at the ballpark with my baby in a carrier in about 2 weeks. And I did what I could. And our staff really stepped up, Glenn stepped up, and we just made it work. But everybody knows my daughter because she was kind of the little one that derailed opening day. And that whole summer I had her in the front pack. And so people will ask me, how old is Sydney now? And I'll tell them, and they're like, oh, we remember the year you had her, And so she definitely is. She's our through and through Bell's baby. She caused a little bit of chaos, and she loves. I don't think there's any other choice, but she loves going to the games. And my husband will take her, and she, runs around. And she doesn't really like the mascot, so she's in that phase where she kind of could take or leave the mascot, but she really likes, she gets to do all the cool things like run around the field after the games and, go out and whatever. So it'll be really fun to raise her at the ballpark. Right. We're having her 4th birthday at the ballpark this year because it coincides with opening day. Yeah. So she really likes it. Yeah, it's good.
That's okay. So that's a great story. That's a great story. Well, thank you for taking the time to make this happen. I appreciate all your help that you've been outside of the episode, if you will. And I'm looking forward to my small part in the league this year and watching a lot of baseball. I'll get to watch a lot more baseball this year than I have ever in the past. So that'll be fun. And I'm hopeful that I'm going to get to see some of the other ballparks this year, that I'm going to be able to travel and go and check out some of the other stadiums. Here's my baby story, if you will. We're getting a puppy in a few days, and I'll have a very young puppy during the season. So, I'm sure nothing can go chaotic there. Yeah. But anyway, no, I'm hopeful that I'm going to get to some of the other ballparks this year. Well, let me ask you, I pause. I'm going to ask you one last question.
Sure.
This is your opinion. Okay. I'm asking you your opinion.
Okay. What
do you think the league's going to look like competitive wise and just in general over the next couple of years? What do you think? Because you mentioned during the episode that in the last 5 years, competition's improved.
Yep.
What do you think's on the horizon? I mean, are we going to, what's the league going to look like in a couple more years, do you think?
Yeah. Well, I don't think that the league is going anywhere but up in every way. In competition, we've really improved that over the last 5 years. We've also added teams. I think we've added, teams have upped their operations. I think they're all connected. And I think where it starts is that we have a group. So we have 16 teams, and we have a group of really excellent, smart, successful owners who are doing this for the right reasons, who understand business, who understand marketing, who understand, positioning a team in the community and what that has to look like. And really, not that it, we've always had great teams in the league, but sometimes people start the teams and they don't necessarily have the resources to put behind them and, to do certain things, certain ways. And now we've got across the league, we've got teams being ran very professionally. And what that lends to is more fans, more programs being willing to work with you, more validity, and everyone kind of starting to see the West Coast League as, wow, this is really the best summer collegiate baseball in the West Coast, and this rivals some of the East Coast leagues. And so we're seeing that more and more, I think. And we've added 5 markets. We've added Edmonton, which is a huge market, 9,000 seat stadium. That's going to be huge for the league. And Nanaimo is a great market. Springfield is a great market. So we've got great markets. We've got great operators. If you were to look at like the board of directors and some of what some of these guys do in their business lives, they're very successful. And they know what they're doing, and they've hired good staffs and had good brands. So I don't see the league, I think the league's probably going to add, this is just my own opinion, but I'd imagine there's going to be more teams, in the future. Wow. And there's going to be people are going to want to be a part of it, and they're going to keep bringing these people in who want to do it in a certain way. And it's just going to be really, really good, I think, for across the board. And so all of that translates more teams, good owners, all of that. It just all translates into better baseball, because it all trickles down to having something that high-end programs want to be a part of, that they can trust, that they want to send players to. And when that happens, I mentioned Matt McLean. This year we have J.R. Ritchie, who is said to be a first-round draft prospect. We've had other guys who have played in the league from other teams. Corvallis has had many. When you have those sort of players being trusted in the West Coast League, the baseball just gets better, and everything else. So yeah, it's very cool. And I think it's, headed nowhere but up.
That's exciting. I mean, in this region has such a long storied baseball history.
Yep, for sure.
It's amazing. So, well, I thank you for your time. I appreciate you doing this. I look forward to our paths crossing in person one day this summer, because I'm sure they will.
Yes.
And you can have the last word.
Well, I don't know that I have one, but I just want to, say thank you to you for working with all of us and for your time today. And I really appreciate it.
Join us next time for another episode of the Exploring Washington State podcast.